We live in troubled times. The world we find ourselves in today is a completely topsy-turvy one. The truth is inverted, and the enemy is all around us. Truly, we are living in the worst possible timeline. One of the deepest delusions is this notion that pets are children, or that dogs are family. There is a huge difference between having a dog and raising a child, and there is an obvious distinction between a dog and a human friend or family member. The bond between two co-workers who are only casually acquainted is far more meaningful than any relationship you could ever have with a dog. For starters, it's all in the name. You own a dog, and consequently there is the term dog owner. But you do not own a family member or any human being. That is slavery.
There's a sinister ideology that's being diffused throughout every part of modern culture. You see it a lot on Quora, but also on Facebook, and the very site we're using right now. The simple fact is that it is very in vogue to hate humanity right now. Increasingly, humans are sympathetic towards every species but their own. You can think of it as like a three-headed hydra. The first two heads are misanthropy and moral nihilism. The third head is dog worship. In order to defeat this all-corrupting Leviathan, you have to cut all the heads off. Of course, there should be no presence of dangerous beasts artificially propagated by people. Remember, hating on your own species seems to be the in thing right now. We've seen the cliché stock responses about how humans destroy the planet and all the rest of it.
Such sentiments are the result of mistaking humans with human systems. The two are not the same. They simply get conflated. Human systems tend to take on a life of their own, and there's a pretty significant difference between what governments and states do on the one hand, as opposed to what average citizens are doing. The same applies to companies and corporations, and these private contractual entities are not somehow separate from the enforcement mechanism maintaining them. Things like corporate malfeasance or the negative externalities of economic paradigms and associated marketing forces are not activities being carried out willingly by the average person on an individual basis. Citing deforestation or climate change as a reason to abhor one's own species is beyond silly. For starters, you are part of that species as well, and you also contribute in an indirect way via consumer habits. This also fails to recognize that people can be conscientious objectors. And obviously not every person is a thief or a murderer. Only some are. A popular refrain on Quora is that humans are trash and animals can do no wrong. But in real-world practice, most people only really use the word animal or animals with reference to dogs rather than actual animals. So what is this so-called speciesism? This is defined as follows.
A prejudice or attitude of bias in favor of the interest of members of one's own species, and against those of members of other species.
But what we see today is not equality. In fact, with dogs we see the reverse of this so-called speciesism, or perhaps it is a form of it, where there is a major prejudice and attitude of bias in favor of the interest of one particular species and against members of one's own species. Although really it should be noted that Canis lupus familiaris is technically a subspecies. It is a subspecies of Canis lupus. Dog nutters are the speciesists, and they are against their own species. Dogs in particular are increasingly gaining the support of extreme interest groups that truly do seem to believe dogs are actually on a par with humans. These once fringe interest groups are growing larger and more vocal by the day. There are people who genuinely do seem to believe wholeheartedly that dogs are somehow better than us. The value of human life has never been lower, and the misplaced affection for this piss-poor excuse for a pet, with so many detrimental effects on society, has never had more widespread support. This should absolutely terrify you. It should galvanize you. The first step is awareness. The evidence of this is everywhere if you just know where to look. It isn't hard to find either. Speaking generally, pets can be lovable and trainable creatures, but they are definitely not us. No matter how much one insists otherwise, a non-human animal is not human, and nor is it a person. For person, I will use the following definition.
A person, plural people, is a being that has certain capacities or attributes such as reason, morality, consciousness, or self-consciousness, and being a part of a culturally established form of social relations such as kinship, ownership of property, or legal responsibility.
This simply does not apply to dogs or any pet animals. It is often asserted without reason, and then furiously defended without logic, that dogs are, you guessed it, man's best friend. But a quick look at the basic definition of friend reminds us of the fact that dogs are not people or persons. The simplest definition of friend is as follows.
A person whom one knows and with whom one has a bond of mutual affection, typically exclusive of sexual or family relations. Emphasis on the word person.
So then why regard any pets as people or fellow humans? No doubt anthropomorphism is among the culprits. People also fail to make a most basic categorical distinction, or they pretend one does not in fact exist. It is worthy of note that during a census, no questions are asked about how many pets are in the home, only human citizens. Paradoxically, the humanization of dogs has led to a state of affairs where there are those who even value the lives of, say, dogs over the lives of their fellow humans. And this humanization must be coupled with the dehumanization of humans themselves. In other words, humans must be devalued, whilst dogs must be erroneously thought of as human in order for this to work. It is a contradiction, of course, because if dogs are our equals, then humans cannot be lesser. Yet in practice, dog worshippers must believe that both are simultaneously true, that dogs are at once equal to us, and that we, the actual humans, are lesser. How does this make a lick of sense to anyone? If humans are so defective in comparison, then you cannot humanize an animal in order to compare it favorably to humans. That is a contradiction. The sad part is that we don't even need to go too far back in history to find a time when there was at least a much more common-sense approach to dogs among dog owners. That is to say that dogs were at least regarded as pet animals and not people or humans. There was a natural separation and a common understanding that certain spheres of human activity and societal influence are off-limits to dogs. Dogs are no longer simply kept for work purposes or as common house pets. No, today they are infantilized, hyperhumanized, deified and spoiled rotten. The whole dog thing has just been done to death. At this point, being a dog owner, or even simply identifying as a dog person, is basically a declaration of conformity. And remember, dog owner is a cultivated identity. Being a dog owner or a dog person is the most banal and unimpressive thing a person could do. Dogs are about as interesting as they are appealing to look at, which is to say not at all. But going back a bit, the stakes could not be higher. We are raising a generation that thinks children, and people generally, are second-class citizens to dogs. People really are growing up around these beasts, which are artificially inserted into their lives, and which they must accept on some level that they are beneath. Nothing could be more destructive than something like this. Once again, examples abound. So don't just take my word for it. Ask or look around, and you will see it for yourself, perhaps even in your own backyard or much closer to home. Misanthropy, moral nihilism and dog worship, that is the three-headed force that is spreading like a cancer, and it seeks infinite expansion and growth on a finite planet. Although it should be noted that there are other ideologies and other factors like mental disorders at work as well. Dogs are not capable of reciprocating your affection, and any impression that this is true is all in your mind. What dogs are, rather, is snake oil. This is a term used to describe deceptive marketing or some kind of fraudulent product or a scam. Typically, this is with reference to something that's touted for its purported health benefits.